Hi, Justin. How are you?
Good, Simon. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. You sound good. You've got a proper microphone. Is the sound okay?
Sounds fine.
Okay.
I'm not picky. I just am grateful for the opportunity to chat with you about this show, which I've been enjoying. I've enjoyed it from season one, and season two has not disappointed. And you're also a fellow Canadian, so come on, I gotta get a Canadian on this show. That's great.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Where are you?
I'm actually not far from Toronto. I'm in the GTA, so I'm in Newmarket,
Oh,
just
nice. Okay.
north of the
Yeah.
city. So, are you from Toronto or?
Yeah. I lived
Awesome.
in Toronto most of my life, so yeah.
And now you're based in LA?
Yes. Yeah. No, I live in
Awesome.
Silver Lake. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Soaking up all that sun. You don't got to deal with Canadian winters, eh?
Some I miss the weather sometimes. Sometimes it's nice to have a little change.
For sure.
But yeah,
Do you
so
visit much? Do you come up to Canada much or?
I get home usually at least once a year.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
awesome. It's great. Well, like I said, I'm very excited to have you on the show, and thank you for making the time to join us on the Geekcentric podcast. We're huge fans of Invincible. Season one did not was incredible, was did not disappoint, and season two continues that momentum. Now, you are co-showrunner, as it's described here. I wanted to know, maybe a fun little anecdote. There's always that way, you when friends think you know what you do and what you actually do. So what do your friends think you do, and what do you actually do as showrunner?
Oh my God, that's a good question. A lot of my friends are in the business, so they know. But I'm not sure. I think people think that I just sometimes just do a script or two for the show.
Mhm.
When in reality, I handle every script. Not personally, I don't personally write every script, but I work with our writers and I edit every script and I work with them to put the stories together. And then I'm usually the last person to touch every script before it goes out into production. It gets sort of like brought into the machine and then made into, the start of production to make it into the show itself. And then I also participate in like all creative aspects of the show going forwards, which obviously Robert does too. We sort of
Mhm.
like tag team that as we take the show forward. So showrunner is basically the position that has overview or oversees the creative vision of the show. Even though, and I want to make this really clear, the show, we have like over 200 people who work on the show, all of them crucial, all of them doing an absolutely incredible job. And obviously you're talking to me today, and I'm sure you maybe talked to Robert, you've seen interviews with him, but there's an enormous number of other people who work on the show who just give it everything and just are just killing it all the way along and work really hard. And I don't want to forget them, like from our
Oh,
supervising
for sure.
directors, yeah, to our cast, to our storyboard artists, to sound team. Like there's a ton of people who contribute to the series all the way through.
Well, it goes without saying, it takes an army to
Mm-hmm.
produce these shows and to have the level of creativity, and everyone's bringing their A game. So, it's a great call out. But for yourself, that's interesting that, the way you are kind of steer the ship creatively, you're very much involved in all parts of the show to ensure the creative vision is very much met. And again, using having a lot of people to work and bounce ideas off of. What drew you to wanting to jump into this show?
Oh, you mean the show specifically, or like the
Yeah.
role of showrunner? This show specific. Well, I had read the comics before I came on board. I wasn't completely up to date. I guess I was about halfway through. A friend of mine who's another big comic reader had been like, "You got to read Invincible. It's really great." So I was familiar with it. I liked Invincible.
Mhm.
And then I'd been doing some other work for Skybound and for Robert on another TV pilot, another hour-long series. And then we started talking about Invincible, and I was like, "Oh, Invincible, yeah, let's talk about that. I am like, that will be amazing." And then when we really started talking about it and realizing like the way to do it justice wasn't to do it live action, but to do it animated and to maybe take it into a new format, like an hour-long format, that was what really, really caught my interest, because that was something brand new that no one had done before. And that's always
Right.
exciting to sort of like push the field, television into like something that really hadn't been done before. And that's, which with that comes a bunch of new challenges and things like that. But that's exciting. That's interesting to me. So
Well, yeah,
yeah.
that's actually one of my questions in regards to, pushing boundaries. Like this show pushes the boundaries of TV animated show in on a conceptual way, because I feel like, you know, like me and my co-host, we were talking about it. The style feels so similar to past superhero style shows that we grew up and we loved, but yet this is far more mature. It's bloody, it's gory, it's very explicit, it's unapologetically explicit in a lot of ways. So I wanted to know, when you guys were developing this, was there any limitations on how you kind of depicted the violence, and why was animation, I guess, the desired choice for this series?
Sure. I mean, there were no real limitations. I mean, like, Eric Kripke has a really good quote about The Boys where he's like, we are what we say on the box. Like,
Right.
what you're getting into with Boys Show. And I think if you read Invincible, read the comic books, uh, we might hopefully shock you with the show in terms of like maybe some different story points, but the books are as violent as the show is.
Right.
So we're just matching that. We're following the tone of the books. We're not actually, I wouldn't say we're exceeding it, but seeing it in motion sometimes can be a little more shocking than seeing it on a panel or on a splash, on a
Yeah.
spread. Um, so that's one of the things. I mean, for us when we were developing it, I mean, to do it justice, to really do the book justice, and to sort of capture, I think, what makes it work so well on the page, it kind of has to be animated.
Right.
Because no TV show would have the budget to do the series live action.
Right.
Because obviously we go to different planets, there's aliens, there's all this sorts of things that are just incredibly huge, and these world shaking fights that to do properly you need a feature level budget for like every single episode. So that's just not
Right.
possible at this point.
Mhm.
Otherwise we'd have to change it, we'd have to pull it down. I mean, like, look, there's lots of great TV shows with superhero stuff in it. Obviously Disney's doing a bunch. You have like the Flash and all Arrowverse and things like that, but they have to make those shows smaller to fit
Mhm.
them into a budget and a shoot schedule
Mhm.
that those shows use. Whereas we didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep all the size and scope and the scale of Invincible. So really, we had two options. One was do it as a radio play or do it, not that we were ever talking about that, but like that, or like do it as, an animated series. And even that, I feel like we're pushing the limits of our budget and our schedule every single day, as many of our team would swear to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too, because Prime Video has definitely, like you mentioned, Disney Plus, and the CW shows, they're already doing their superhero motifs, but Prime Video definitely has its own unique place in the superhero genre, where, as you mentioned, they're choosing more mature stories, more mature content, and to have the boys live in the live action, again, that's a whole other army and a whole other team that has to bring that to life. To have animation, have this story done in animation, helps to kind of elevate that whole concept of mature comic book stories in a
Mm-hmm.
new medium of animation. So I really appreciate it, and more or less just the idea of understanding, was there conversations there about maybe pushing live action, but I'm glad that it was always intended to be animation, because it looks beautiful. It's so well done. I wanted to ask you, with season one so well received, what were some of the high level story decisions that you guys wanted to push in season two that would very much continue the momentum and development of these characters?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is there in the books. I mean, like the other thing that sort of attracted me to Invincible early on was that it has a start, it has a middle, it has an end. Like the
Mm-hmm.
series wrapped basically. Robert wrote the last issue just as I was kind of brought onto the show and just starting development on it. So that's exciting to me. Whereas like Spider-Man doesn't have an end, and like I love Spider-Man. Like Spider-Verse movies, I think are just absolutely top notch, but it doesn't have an end to it, right? Spider-Man is a continuing character. There's a bit of churn to that, right? Invincible doesn't have that. It starts there. Mark goes through a lot of experiences, and then there's a wrap up to it. There's a finality to it, and that's that. As from a narrative point of view, I mean, what is a story without an ending? Isn't really a story, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's I find that really appealing about the process, and one of the things I want to accomplish with the show is get to that ending. What was the question? I forget.
That was very much kind of
Yeah,
in line with that, in terms of where you guys want to go with season two. So it's
yeah.
great that there's a sort of finale that's in mind because of the source material. Again, I should probably preface, I haven't read the comics, nor have I read the comics for the boys. It definitely has piqued my interest, but what I
Mm-hmm.
love is that the show, like a show like this, like Invincible, and even the boys, again, talking about Prime Video superhero genre, it's inciting that interest. Like a lot of people say, you got to go read, Invincible, because the stories in there, they're just as good as they are in this animated series. And that there's a certain sort of change in the way that you experience it in a comic book, and
Yeah.
obviously versus in the medium of television. But there's no shortage of great characters that are featured in this show, and even with the show that is called Invincible, we're seeing such a collection of characters. Um, Even though their stories may not necessarily influence the larger story, and some of them do, how do you guys find the balance of incorporating all that? Is that, again, going back to the source material to find how much you involve those characters?
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, like now, sort of also to pick up on your last question, I mean, like, one of the things we do is, I think, on Invincible is because we are one story, we never start fresh. We never start new. We always have to pick up where we left off. So, a
Right.
part of second season, the planning was not only incorporating, stories and the themes and things that Robert has in the book, but also being like, okay, where did we leave everyone? We have to pick them up where we left them off, in which, in many
Right.
cases, which is like hurt, traumatized, dealing with loss, grieving, struggling. We have to pick those characters up from those places. And the good thing about that for us is that stuff is usually the compelling stuff about drama, right? Nobody
Mhm.
just wants to see a happy character going about their day. They want to see people like fighting through pain and like struggle and collapse and everything like that. So
Yeah.
that's something we try to do. And then in terms of like characters versus like major versus minor, I mean, I think Mark. It's obviously the show is called Invincible. It's about Mark. It's about Mark and his family primarily, but like a lot of the characters go through really interesting things, and maybe not even in this season, maybe in next season. Maybe you'll
Mhm.
see their story really blossom in season 4 or 5 if we're lucky enough to get there. So it's just
Right.
sort of like finding out which characters are ones that we need to drop in. We try to drop in on everybody to at least show you how everyone is dealing, but different characters get different bigger plot lines at certain points in the story, and we try to, that either comes up from the books or it comes up organically in the room, and we're like, you know what, let's tell this story really reflects on what Mark is going through, or it's an opposite to what Mark's going through, but we feel like it would mesh well with his main storyline. Let's talk about that. Let's spend some time with that person.
Right. Now, I have two more questions. My second last question here. You're no stranger to working on animation and having worked on, Teen Titans, and I believe you worked on the Boys Diabolical anthology series, if I'm not
Yes, yeah,
mistaken.
that's it.
Yes,
There's the poster
that's what
there.
I thought. Okay, I was wondering if that was in the back there. Now, this has been a huge year for animation. Great movies, great series. I wanted to know, outside of obviously what you've been working on, has there been anything this past year from the animation medium that has stuck with you as just being like, a wow?
I mean, Spider-Verse. I mean, the new Spider-Verse film. I
Yeah.
mean, like, look, I'm going to say, I'm going to go on a limb here and say, like, I wasn't crazy about it being a two-parter because I like endings to films, and I didn't know it
Yes.
was a two-parter when I went into it. But man, to those guys, every single scene, every single frame of that film is a work of art, and is astounding. And it kind of makes me want to be like, well, they sort of solved it. They've done the best possible animated feature, so I should probably just like quit now. So that blew me away, and I'd say out of everything I've seen recently, that's probably the thing that really made me sit back and just like shake my head most of the way through the film and just be like, what are they? How did they? Oh my god, the time and the effort and the design, because I know how much
Time.
work
Yeah.
that would take to bring that to
Yeah.
life, but also just the artistic creativity. They made everything mattered, and that is how it felt. Like every background mattered, the color choices mattered, everything was contributing to a whole, and I found that
Yeah.
inspiring and you know envy inducing.
Well, it's funny too because Mutant Mayhem, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that was really a great sort of
Mm-hmm.
creative feat, I think, as well. And then a series that we just watched on Netflix, if you get a chance, Blue Eye Samurai. I know you're an animation fan. It is Blue Eyed Samurai is fantastic in terms of pushing boundaries as a recommendation to a fellow fan of animation. Now, my last question here, the finale for part one is in sight. I just wanted to know for yourself, what do you hope fans take away from this first part leading in to part two coming into 2024?
Both a sense of relief and a sense of dread about what's coming. I hope a sense of relief of being like, oh, we got through that. Okay, everything, like those were 4 episodes. They were like hopefully emotionally draining in some places, exciting in others. Hopefully, they make you think for the next
Yes.
few weeks or hopefully months or afterwards, to just make you reflect on it, that you don't just forget it.
Mhm.
That's what I'm hoping people take back, and then get ready for, and then that will hopefully carry people into the second half of the season,
Yes.
where a lot of questions might be answered. Maybe some more questions will be asked. Not everything gets an easy answer, because in life, not
No.
everything gets an easy answer. Some things are just the way they are. So I'm hoping All your experiences, all the experiences of the audience watching season one, and will hopefully carry people into the back half, wanting more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want more. It was definitely after I watched the 4 episodes, because at the point of when I'm posting this, the fourth episode hasn't dropped, but I definitely was left, feeling weighted and winded and very excited that there was a bit of a pause there. But there's such a human touch to this season that really does explore the sort of trauma, like you were talking about earlier, the trauma for that these characters have to deal with. Again, infusing that human touch and giving a little more drama and gravitas to the situations that happened in season one. So I think it's a perfect follow-up. I'm very excited for part two. Simon, thank you so much for joining us on the Geekcentric podcast. It really means a lot to get a little more insight and talk with you more about this fantastic show. I'm very much looking forward to what's next for Mark.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you for watching the show and your kind words. And I'm hoping we won't disappoint you and everyone else with the back half of season two. Thanks for your time, and thanks for having me anytime.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Okay, take care.